The greatest thing from Quebec since Celine Dion and GSP.
A pair of siblings.
A couple of stellar young men.
Two brothers.
These two young men.
Two siblings.
The hard-hitting pair represent Canada.
Welcome to Thinkin Bros. My name is Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. Today, I'm sipping on sparkling water, or as my fellow whites call it, spicy water. You've heard that before for sure.
It just sparkles on the tongue.
You spend quite a lot of time in those circles.
Oh dear.
And but we are going to be discussing Camus' L'étranger, which is The Stranger, which is apparently one of his best philosophical works. Is it now? And well, yeah, we talked last time about how I saw a top 50 books ever written in literature on YouTube. I'm pretty sure he's the guy who has the uncontested best video on that. He has 4 million views. It's 40 minutes, blah blah. And it was at number 40, as I said last time. We disagree, I think.
Did you listen to his arguments? Did he put arguments in for each book?
No, he just gave... I did go to that time and check exactly what he said. He just gave a few impressions just to, accustom you to the thing.
Okay.
And he was just saying I remember... I think it was about this book. Maybe I just watched a little bit too much of the video, but he was saying, I remember after school sitting on the bleachers and reading some Camus, and I wanted to discuss it with someone, but then I realized that none of my friends had read it, and that's when I realized I needed a new circle or something a little bit cheesy. And in the second part, we're going to be talking about Peak, Secrets from the New Science of Expertise by Anders Ericsson, not to be confused with Erik Erikson, everyone's favorite something researcher. What does he research?
He's a neo-Freudian.
Right, that.
Everyone's
favorite neo-Freudian, right? For all the psychologists out there. So, yeah, let's start with Camus.
L'étranger.
L'étranger. Or The Stranger. Now, in my memories, I thought it was a better book when I had read it in high school. Ever since I had quite a romantic memory of it. And I think I figured out why. And I think it's because existentialism and absurdism is a little bit like the emo equivalent of philosophy. It's an emo phase. And in our classification of meaning of life, it's also phase 2 out of 3. And it feels like that's exactly what it would be, right? You're happy in childhood. You're kind of innocent and you don't know about the blah, blah, blah of the world. Then you discover a few things, just enough to get you worried about life. So you go into an emo phase of, blocking out others and all these dark thoughts, right? And then you emerge on the other side in phase 3, being able to be happy again.
Yeah, I don't like you lumping in existentialism with it, because existentialism is like Dostoevsky. But
okay, fair enough. I apologize.
Yeah, absurdism.
It's just I'm thinking about Sartre and Camus, and if I had to say one word, they also are involved in the movement. But yeah, absurdism. Yeah,
I suppose. Yeah, in my memory, it was also. Well, the thing is, what we did in high school about these books, as we saw in our annotations of it, is underline the time. And say, what role do time indicators play in the overall narrative? Just some high school analysis stuff. I guess not really going into just reading and enjoying the philosophy as much. Because, people were less of philosophers back in the day.
Also, you had less experience to map it onto.
Right. Where does this place in your structure of other philosophers or how you think about life or whatever?
Your mental representation.
In your mental representation of a mental representation. And I guess I put it down as I read it, I didn't really get the point. I often do this, right? I read something, I don't really get the point, but I'm like, okay, maybe there's things I'm missing, and maybe there's still things I'm missing, but rereading it now, I don't know, 5 years later, didn't really do it for me.
Yeah, I also understand why it was so relatable and like I had an emotional connection to it for me. And it's because the man is purely logical. And ultimately, that's what an absurd man is, I think, according to Camus at the very least. We're going to get into the storyline. I can outline it this time if you want, because I have it right in front of me. But at some point, someone asks him, "Did you love your mother?" And he says, "Like everyone else."
Right.
Right? And it's like, that kind of shocks the person who he's talking to.
Yeah, I think
But, right? Yeah.
What, bud?
But that's what it is, though, right?
It is what it is. But I think the point is, like, in the context of everything else he's saying, I think what that means is, that's what I'm answering because I don't know if I loved her, right? Something like that.
No, I don't. I think deeper than that, I think is just, because I was supposed to love her.
Yeah,
That's
more
what
right.
people do, right? So, okay, let me get into the story. There are 2 parts. The second one is the trial. But unfortunately, to tell you that, I had to spoil the end of the first part for
a crime,
where the crime happens. So okay, Meursault is our protagonist, which it's kind of cool to have such an aggressively French name that is actually pronounceable in English, right? With the EAULT at the end, and it's just like Meursault.
Right,
It's a good name.
It should be MERSO though.
So for now, you're doing a good job, Camus. So he finds out about his mother's death. Then he has to take a bus for 3 hours to go visit her.
Body.
And and already you get the impression where I think he's thinking about how he didn't go see her. And he's thinking about how, he didn't go see her when she was alive. And he's thinking about how the 3-hour bus ride is long and it'll be, annoying. It's an annoyance, right? And already you get the absurd man's focus on, I guess, the physical, this is physical and mental, right? For him, in a way. It's never emotional. It's never on a higher degree than that. He's just, I guess he's living in the moment in a sense where there's no emotional connection really.
I guess it's weird to categorize because one of the main things, and he says it explicitly at some point in the book, is that he's very sensitive to physical sensations.
Oh, yeah.
Right? But
he basically shoots because of the sun. Right?
Yeah. But is that, and I so believe him though.
I did get it.
That's
I actually did. It's like your hand is like, it's already on the trigger and like the sun is there and it's like, how do I get it? You know what?
Yeah.
Just you saying that and me not being the only one who had that impression, I think Camus just went up a little bit.
Right. Yeah. He did.
But it was good.
is that what you expect from the absurd man though? Being in tune with his body and his sensations. It's weird to have that. I would expect rationality, happening in the brain,
like the opposite, right? Like the stoicism, like a perverse stoicism, right?
Yeah. Is this like an absurd hedonist or something? Like he only does, yeah.
I don't know why it makes sense to me though, because I'll explain this later. But the biggest impression I got from the whole book was that it was all an act. It was just a theater play, and you get the impression when he addresses social conventions, he wants to say something. His like animalistic instinct is to say something. Then he stops himself because he remembers, oh right, that's not what people do.
Yeah.
In a way. So for some reason, I don't know, later on when he's on trial, he wants to like be polite with someone or say thank you. And he's like, but that would be weird because I just killed somebody, right? So he stops himself. So honestly, I forgot my point. But
it's
in a way,
play. It's a theater.
the rational thing could work, but if you're applying it on a societal sense, it's all a convention, it's all a play, and it's all made up. So what is the only thing that's not actually made up? it's your sensations, right? And you definitely get the sense of that through the way that he falls in love, and well, actually, he never pretends to have fallen in love, but whatever. So okay, he goes to the funeral. He's a little bit indifferent. Well, he's very indifferent. I don't know. He sleeps through parts of it because the sun is pissing him off. Now, for some reason, it becomes a key element later, but
Very key element.
I don't know if you know.
We're talking about the same thing. He smokes in front of the body.
Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna say a similar thing. It's about he accepts the coffee with milk. You remember, because when it's I'm gonna spoil it, because when it's mentioned in court later, everyone gasps. Everyone's like, "No way, you accept it." Something like that. That's how it happened in my mind, at least. So,
but for me, it was more about the cigarettes. Like, and it seems more reasonable. Just when you are the character, or when you're reading through the perspective of Meursault, right? I feel like I was in it, and I was like, there was some mention, like, oh, should I accept this cigarette or not? And he accepted, and I was like, I brushed it over. It was like, okay, he's smoking,
of course.
But
yeah, and that's a lot about. I think it says quite a lot about theory of mind as well. We are living it through Meursault, and everything he does seems so much more reasonable. But if you saw him from the outside, and this is going to come up later, right?
Right.
With the old lady with the weird routine in the cafe, in the Celeste's cafe. I feel like that's what Meursault would look like a little bit from the outside.
I was also going to say, yeah, that's a good point. And I was also going to say where it became most apparent that, like, we're living it through his perspective, and it does sort of make sense. Like, Camus puts us in his perspective and makes it make sense, but when he interacts with his new friend, I don't remember his name, the pimp.
Raymond.
At least,
he does shopping.
Yeah, he does shopping. What's his name?
Raymond.
Yeah, Raymond. Like, you understand, oh wait, yeah, he's going along with life, but like he really shouldn't right there.
Yeah, good point. So, okay. Then he's indifferent. He kind of just goes through the motions, as with, honestly, the rest of his life. The day after, he goes to I thought it was a pool, but then I read some summaries online, and it's said to be a beach. Was it a beach?
Yeah. I always
okay. Okay, so he goes to the beach, then he meets this lady, Marie,
who he knew before, right?
Yeah, kind of. So then they kind of just get together through, it's almost like a dance in a club, but it happens at the beach, where they look at each other, then they smile, and then they start dancing together in the water or something.
Right. That's how he describes it, though. Like,
okay,
he describes it like, we meet, and then, I touch her breast, and then we go home, and then in the morning we wake up together. I feel like hearing it through his perspective is not like exactly how it happened.
Right,
and certainly
like,
not how Marie sees it.
Yeah. She like, I don't know, talked to him about his day, and he like reacted, and he shared a little bit and opened up on his. No, I'm sure it really didn't happen that way. But yeah, again, the perspective does change. So again, he describes her only in physical aspects. There's no, there's no love to be had there, at the very least in the non-absurd sense. So then that happens, and I think he had the Friday off and the Saturday off, and now it's Sunday. Marie goes away, and he enters this misery of a day, but to him it's just the routine, right? It's Camus' routine. He just kind of just goes through his day, just burns through it. And with my current focus on productivity, I was getting angry. Like, he probably wakes up at like 10 a.m. He smokes some cigarettes and drinks some coffee with Marie. Then she goes away. Then he goes on his terrace and starts smoking away, and I don't know, either drinking wine or something. He sees people coming back from a festival. Then he's
going to the festival.
Yeah, going to the festival. Then he's like too lazy to go buy food, so he like chooses not, something like that. Like, and then he kind of just, in a bullet point manner, explains how his entire day is just for my standards, burned away. Like that's not those 18 hours are just never coming back to him.
Oh yeah, he did nothing.
Yeah, like it's absolutely a lost Sunday. But to him, it's like
breakfast is so late. Every time they eat breakfast, it's at like noon or something.
The French, eh? The French. Is that in France? Does it happen in France? I don't know. I think so.
Algeria?
Right. Some colony, whatever. It doesn't matter. So
Some colony.
he goes through the motions. Everything seems purposeless. Then he encounters Salamano, who has this 8-year love-hate relationship with his dog. That, I don't know, he beats up the dog barks back. The dog is ugly, it's got a sickness. That's probably symbolic as well. Maybe I didn't catch exactly why. But here's where I started getting an impression of the story. I noted it down somewhere in the book. I don't know if you saw, but the story is like a theater play. So it's like a story with 3 actors, and they all have different costumes, and they actually can play, I don't know, 8 characters, you know? Where there's like a restricted character book, and you have to make those characters interact because you don't have much going on for you. You understand? Do you see what I'm saying? It's like you have to reuse characters and make them interact no matter how unlikely it is. So love or hate between the dog and Salamano, or the incompatibility of Raymond and Meursault, who just doesn't care, but Raymond is just explicitly immoral.
Right.
It's almost like you're putting them together and like, yo, I have to make these characters work together because we only had funding for 6 characters.
Yeah, but they're living in the same building. I mean, they're neighbors. You mean?
Yeah,
I don't know exactly.
You know,
what
like
you mean,
those sitcoms of like from Psych, when Gus is, his projected future is pretty sad, and it's like a sitcom where the living room is the entire panel and there's an audience in front of it. That's how the book felt, because it has, I don't know, 6 characters. They all kind of interact with each other. No
I mean, I guess at certain points, like maybe you're talking about the middle of the book, but at other points, like when he's at the funeral, there are a bunch of other people. There are the concierge. Well, that makes him sound too fancy, I think. But there's the concierge, the director.
The concierge of crime, Raymond and Reddington. But yeah, no. I get what you're saying, but it was just an impression for me. I'm not saying that's the structure of the book. I'm saying that's an impression I got, and that was the first time I thought about how it feels like a play, and I'm going to come back to all the elements and make you feel like a theater play. So, okay. Then he encounters Raymond. Now, he's explicitly violent. He makes violence logical. He's like, you know, I provoked the guy, then he disagreed with me, so then I hit him, obviously.
Yeah.
And Meursault, I put the word amoral.
Mm-hmm.
Meursault is amoral. He simply doesn't care. For him, it's logical. And I also identified proximity to be the determining factor of
who he agrees with.
Yeah, who he agrees with, and even who he. I mean, again, he never uses the word, but loves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Marie is the closest one to him, and he sees her physical aspects, so he loves her. Well, he's with her, whatever, right? And it's funny because at a later point, they go out and then they walk on the street and he says to her, "Oh, these women are attractive, eh?" Like do you remember that point?
I don't remember that point, actually.
Oh
yeah, and she agrees. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, she says something. I think she says something, and then after that, they don't speak for a few minutes. So that's a really good perspective taking. It's really, really interesting. I think she says, okay, I remember exactly because I thought that was a really funny moment. She says that Meursault says she understood me. She said she understood me. So Meursault thinks, I noticed that the other women were really attractive. I asked Marie if she noticed it, and then she said she understood me. Then we didn't talk for a few minutes. That was
Okay.
like the exact way that happened. That's really fun.
Mhm.
So again, if Marie's there, then she's going to be the one for him. Again, Raymond lives next to him. Raymond approaches him. He like insists on being his friend. He asks him, do you want to be my friend? Meursault says, I don't know. It's all the same to me. And because Raymond is there and he describes his violent acts, for Meursault it's just like, oh, well, he pissed you off and then you hit him. So yeah, he deserved it and then you got what you wanted. So it's logical. So again, perfectly logical, absurd.
Yeah, but this makes me think like that he's a worse person than I initially thought. Because at some points also he gets he does get bored with people. It's not like everyone that talks to him, no matter what, he accepts it and goes along with it. At some points he's like, okay, well, like sometimes I get bored and I get
Like
pissed
the
off,
people
and
who try to make him religious, right? All like
Right.
both the people.
he gets pissed off, right?
Yeah.
And so him accepting that Raymond is violent, now I'm seeing it a little bit in a new light and like, being outside his perspective more. I get how he arrives to it because I guess the character is well described, but I think it's worse than I previously thought. It's not like it is something, well, obviously it's something you should oppose yourself to, but I feel like he's selective in what he accepts
okay.
as people presented to him and what he doesn't.
That's a good point, but you also have to look at, I mean, I actually didn't think about it, so it is a really good point, but you have to look at it from the absurd man's perspective, and I think if you are only concerned with your, immediate emotions, it's all about the sensations, then at least Raymond is entertaining, right? He's like, oh, I met this guy, I met this woman, I beat her up. It's like, and he does go through the motions with it. But when he later talks to the priest and also to the judge, I mean, these are prolonged conversations where they repeat. Like, why do you not believe in God? Why do you not believe in God, right? And it's like the 7th time. So then he gets pissed off.
I like the priest though. I don't think he was that repetitive, the priest.
Yeah, but I mean, he was insistent.
He was insistent, but I think I guess we'll get to it with the priest.
Yeah, we can get to it. But what I'm saying is, I don't think he's like maliciously selective as well, you didn't say maliciously, but that's
Yeah.
what he kind of meant. I think it's really about kind of what the conversation entails. Like, if the priest is sitting there and his goal is to make him accept God at the end, like, he already told him 3 times that he's not going to accept God because he just doesn't believe in it. Like, keeping on insisting doesn't change anything for Meursault.
Well, it does change something. I mean, he gets angry, and I don't think he gets angry solely because, look, you've told me and I told you no, and that's it. He feels a type of way about it. Like later,
That's the only
cries.
time he gets
right.
angry. Right?
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. I'm. Despite everything, I think I'm discovering this a better book than I thought.
It's a better book than we thought initially. It's just, I think last week when, especially after the first part, I like the second part better.
I like
for
the
one.
first part better.
You like the first part better?
Yeah.
I liked the last chapter with the priest and how he thinks.
I have it in my links. It looks like the Sartre's The Wall, no?
Yeah.
That's the same progression, I think.
Yeah.
With some key differences, but I wasn't really good at spotting them.
It's just I came down from my room after reading the first part and I was like, okay, fine, dude. I think I was angry at Meursault mostly. That's what it is. Like the way just he lives his life is insane.
It is quite anger inducing. And the interaction here is a little bit like Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, right? Between part 1 and part 2, where you could read part 1 and it kind of, reading part 2 really changes your perspective of part 1, right? You can't transfer everything you learned in part 1 about the book and say, okay, that's exactly what's going to happen in part 2. It's like a different
We learned some
thing.
things in part 2, but it's like reversed. Because Dostoevsky, the second part is what happens in his life.
Yeah.
And the first part is what happens in his life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and during the meeting with Raymond, he asked him to write a letter for him to an ex-girlfriend to invite her over and basically enact his revenge on her. So she was cheating, but not really, or something. Something. Yeah, something happened. He was angry, obviously. Now he's a violent man. He wanted to seduce her last time before literally spitting in her face and whatever. Just, an emotional revenge. So Meursault writes this letter inviting her for one last time to like apologize for his acts or something, right? Bait her in, okay? Another day, Meursault wakes up with Marie. They hear some screaming, and essentially what happens is Raymond is confronted by some policemen at his door after the revenge act degenerated into a fight, as it probably often does with Raymond. Then Meursault had to be a character witness for Raymond, and he just said no,
Well, I mean,
he
also,
loved her or something.
No, I think it's like she did him wrong. Like she did something wrong,
right, yeah.
which is pretty crazy. It wasn't a fight, as you said. It was a beating, actually. But
No, but that's the thing. She slapped him first, which was what started the fight, which prompted the fight, kind of.
okay, I guess.
And all I'm saying is that for the legal matter,
Right.
I mean, it's audacious to call it self-defense, but like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, especially, I guess they don't say explicitly what the girl had, but I imagine, like, he didn't slap her back. If you know what I'm saying.
Well, he slapped her with the other side of the hand, and his hand was closed.
Okay, yeah. And he did that multiple times. Yeah, and then this whole thing seemed to go away when Meursault came and said, like, oh, she did something wrong.
Yeah, the policeman was really more angry than pursuing legal action, let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
He was like, hey, stop it. Okay. Then Raymond comes to talk to Meursault, and essentially, you get the sense that there's this banality of violence where he's kind of... Raymond is kind of upset that she slapped him and whatnot, and the police stuff. And then Meursault's just like, oh, well, you must be happy because she got what she deserved.
Yeah.
But in a logical way, not like, oh, yeah. Then the two encounter Salamano, who just lost his dog. Then later on, he tells a story about how he lost his wife and got the dog as a replacement. And essentially, Salamano was really, really sad about having lost his dog. And he even, at the end of a chapter, he says, I hope that no dogs howl tonight because I always think it's mine. So there's really a depiction of this love-hate relationship and how deep it runs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now,
and also you get the sense that everyone just likes Meursault. That's what it made me think about, because when he's talking with Salamano, I guess it's just the nature of... I think it's a misinterpretation of his character. Everyone just misinterprets his character. He's silent, he doesn't say anything, and then he just agrees with whatever the person says. So everyone's like, oh, he likes me. Like, he's so cool. And
right.
Salamano...
You're such a good listener.
Right. Salamano,
he just doesn't
Raymond,
care.
And he just doesn't care. So, I mean, I think Raymond and Meursault are different types of psychopath. Like, Raymond is the full-on, like, I want to hurt people because they did me wrong.
Isn't it psychopath versus sociopath?
Sociopath,
like,
maybe,
Meursault is the sociopath here.
But I just feel so bad for Marie. Just imagine.
Oh, no, I mean.
Because, like, she like, they get out of the apartment, she sees what happens, like, Raymond just beat the other woman. And then a couple days later, he's like, oh yeah, you want to come hang out at the chalet with my friend Raymond?
Yeah, and she accepts it.
Yeah. I mean, she's just very in love with him, but yeah.
Yeah, and when she asks him, do you want to marry me? Meursault says, yeah, sure, if you want to.
Then she's like, would you have said that for another woman? And he's like,
yeah,
well, probably, yeah.
And then she says, oh, you're so weird, but I think that's why I like you. Right. So it's really
bad.
It's uncomfortable. And Man, I experienced this firsthand. I think it really brings up this. Again, this is beyond the scope of our discussion, but I love this person, but they hurt me, but I still love them, which I cannot understand, which is why it makes it so interesting for me. But the Salamano interaction, and I've seen some of that in my line of work recently, so which is why it really makes me interested in it. Okay, so then again, they get invited to, well, the whole thing with Marie happened where she asks him if he wants to marry her, and he's indifferent as always. So then Meursault gets called up at his work by Raymond and gets invited to, again, a chalet on the beach to spend a weekend away, whatever. If it's not a weekend, I apologize. In our translation, it was the weekend. So yeah. I mean, these friends really seem like a sweet couple. They feel like maybe the only normal people. Like, I just thought of that, right? Like Marie, I guess Marie's normal, but she just falls in love with a psychopath, which, again, considering the trend a few years ago where women were watching these Ted Bundy's documentaries like it was popcorn, and the whole psychopathy craze happened, I wouldn't have understood. But yeah, that's she is normal. But anyway, they're a sweet couple. They invite him, and honestly, I'm gonna go through this part because there's no way we're still doing the summary at 34 minutes. Everything's good, the sun keeps rising, the heat keeps rising. They spend a little bit of time in the water, blah blah blah. Then while they eat, and then while the dishes are being done, the three men walk on the beach: Raymond's friend, and Meursault. And what I didn't mention is that a group of people, including the ex's brother, what was like the person Raymond beat up, the ex, they've been following the three men. Well, they've been following Raymond. So, they're kind of agitated by that a little bit, but they keep it in the back of their mind. And then when they walk down the beach, they're surprised to see that they actually followed them to the beach as well. Now, a brawl begins, and it feels like I don't even know what those men really wanted in the beginning. Like, yeah, they stood in front of the group of three people, but really, Raymond just essentially charges at the first guy and.
Yeah, but I think, as always with Raymond, he was waiting for a provocation or whatever. But in this case, it was the guys stopping. Like, they stopped walking. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And also, I don't understand those two guys, because there were two of them and three of the protagonist and Raymond and his friend, and they were walking, and it felt like they could have just walked past each other. But it says in the book, like, the other two stop. They stop walking.
Yeah, but it could have been really. I mean, they had been observing them and following them for a few days. So maybe a fight was in order, but it could have really been just a heart-to-heart conversation about, like, never touch my sister ever again or something like that. It could have been. But the thing is, again, like, Raymond was looking for it, for sure.
For sure. And maybe it's all through the interpretation of sort of Meursault, but also Raymond, because Meursault just goes along with whatever Raymond says, right?
Yeah.
Because what we didn't mention also is that when they were going out to go to the chalet and to go to the beach, that group of people with the brother of the ex that Raymond beat up was there waiting in front of the apartment and sort of looking at the apartment's exit. But as they walked past, they noticed that that group of people did nothing, and they just kept looking at the exit and not them. Remember that?
Right. So he could have honestly just been working at a place nearby and smoking a cigarette outside, and then on the beach, he could have spent a day on the beach just like them.
Yeah. And then he stopped because are you not going to talk to the person that beat up your, I don't know.
Right. And it's fair because they were, oh my God.
I didn't even think of this before.
Yeah, but me neither, because they were walking from the other direction, right? And the men had walked for, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes now,
probably, yeah.
away
yeah.
from their hut.
Yeah.
So they could have just been spending a day on the beach. And obviously, if you run into the person who just beat up your sister, you're going to stop, right?
I guess you're gonna stop, but like even being on the side of Raymond in the sense that, like, seeing his interpretation is that what else are you? Well, from his perspective, what else are you gonna do but beat that person up?
Oh, for sure,
right? But from his perspective, maybe they were gonna do something else.
Again, okay,
yeah. I don't know.
He before going into the fight, the Raymond's friend is a little bit of a bigger guy, so Raymond says, "Okay, you take that guy." To his friend, and then he gives Meursault a revolver and says, "Okay, if something goes wrong, just shoot." And then he goes.
Not yet, I think.
I'm pretty sure before the fight he like plans it out. I'm pretty sure. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. We can jumble this up. So then one of the guys gets out a knife, stabs Raymond, and then they either run away or the fight ends. In any case. So then Raymond is brought back to the hut. He goes to see a doctor, and Meursault just wants some time alone, so he walks right back on the same line of the beach and sees, well, after walking for 15 minutes or something, he sees the man, and he sees one of the men who stabbed Raymond, and he's alone now, and he's sitting on the beach. And I think that the man is, what is it called?
Sunbathing.
No, sunbathing, but I think the man is on guard. And does he take out the knife just to show him that he has it?
Well, I think the thing is, Raymond went out in the way he tells the story. He went out and to seek the place where they saw the people who are described as Arabs in the book.
They didn't explicitly identify as Arabs.
Right, they didn't say they were Arabs.
But from the absurd perspective of Meursault.
But there seemed to be a nice spot with a rock and like a pond beside it or something. Sure. And Meursault said, "I'm going there. Like I wanna like bathe in the sun or like go in the water there." And that's where he was going, and that's where he found that guy. And they had like a face-off where they were just standing. The guy was like lying down, and Raymond says like, "Oh, the sun was coming down, and I don't know why I took a step forward." And it's when he takes that step forward that the guy pulls out the knife.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah.
It's all kind of mechanical. I guess the step forward is inexplicable, but then obviously the knife is taken out, so. I think it's, again, as absurd people get, it's animalistic in the sense that, you know, the eye contact, the prolonged standoff, the step forward showing aggression, the other guy showing what he's got as a weapon. Then the sun kind of, I don't know, blinds him and makes him tired and lose control, essentially. So then in the book, it's quite well described in the sense that you, for some reason, you just kind of understand why he does it, right? So he takes out the gun, he shoots once, then pauses and shoots 4 more times. And yeah, that's the crime. That's the whole first part. Now, one thing I didn't mention is an earlier encounter with a strange lady. That's just important for the absurd part. I think after a morning with Marie or something, he goes to dine at his friend Celeste's restaurant, and then he sees this lady. Do you remember what happens with her?
I remember that he I don't remember her routine, but he judges her routine, and he's like, wow. Well, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, I think she, essentially, in my memory, but it might be very different in the book, she sits down, instantly orders her first meal, second meal, blah, blah, blah. Then she has a routine planned out in waiting for the soup, for example. Then she has some like journals to wait for the second part and whatnot. And Meursault just finds it weird, whereas essentially he's kind of the same, but in a less structured way. He just kind of, I don't know. I feel like he stalls until the night. He just stalls until the night. That's what his life feels like. In any case, but then also when he's in prison, he thinks back at his time at the beach and actually enjoys that. But maybe because it's physically stimulating and bathing in the water and I don't know.
There's a lot of mention in the second part where, yeah, in my previous life when I was happy, and you're like, oh, you were happy. Like
yeah.
I didn't know that.
That made you happy, right? The cigarettes on the balcony.
But also
every French dream, I guess.
What about like him leaving in the middle of the day his workplace, and he like probably goes chill with a friend and like drinks and whatever, and then comes back and then works the afternoon.
I didn't even notice that.
No,
chronology.
He leaves work. He goes to a restaurant or something with a friend, and then he just comes back and works in the afternoon. It's weird.
Anyway, so with this weird lady, when she's done, he's so weirded out that he just follows her for like a few blocks just to see where she's going because he doesn't have anything better to do. And it's so ironic that he is weirded out by what she's doing, but he's a grown man taking time out of his day just to, with no purpose. Like, what is he gonna end up seeing? You know, her walking into a hut in a tree, something like she's a fairy or something. He's never gonna notice anything but her walking back to her apartment or whatever her next step is. So,
but she loses him.
Yeah. So yeah, again, she I don't know. She either walks faster or turns Meursault loses the lady. So it's really funny to see the contrast of him being weirded out by routine. And again, Camus playing on the routine thing, where in the myth of Sisyphus, it's really important for him, and it's part of the human condition for him. Okay, well, I mean, we're doing the summary, and at the same time, we're discussing a few points, so it's all good. I'm not that good with second part. It's all jumbled up in my head. I have a few notes. I mean, yeah, he gets arrested. He gets questioned by a judge. And the lawyer talks to him. And once again, this is where I get a big impression that it's all a play. Because when the lawyer tells him to say some specific things that are going to make him appear in a good light, Meursault says, well, why would I say that? It's a lie. And then the lawyer looks at him weirdly, right? He's like, what? You're worried about lying? I mean, your life is at stake.
It felt like the lawyer was trying to get something out of him that sounded presentable, right? He was like, okay, let me ask the question in this way. And then Meursault's like, I guess, like everyone. And then he's not satisfied with that and asks it in another way. And like, when he gets a half human answer, he's like, yeah, go with that.
Yeah. Then again, I'm going to go through some key points. If you think some parts of it are more interesting than others, tell me about them, and then I'll just give my impressions on the whole book. So then, Marie visits him in jail. Then she kind of daydreams about him getting out and them marrying, and he responds, "You think?
You think we're gonna get married?" Oh,
like he just says, "Really? You think?" In response to all of her daydreams,
it's like no future plans at all. It's just like, oh yeah, we're gonna get married when I get out.
Yeah, and then
like it doesn't involve him.
Exactly. Yeah, he is a spectator, and
no, he's a stranger.
Right. So then, to justify him saying that, he says, "Well, it was really just to say something that I said that," and it feels like everything he says is just to say something. But again, the earlier point you made about everyone liking him and kind of confiding in him, and him being the psychologist of the group, right? Salamano seeming like this violent against animals, old sad man who lost everything and is closed on the world and is always angry at his dog and shouts at it and kicks it. And then he kind of just confides in Meursault about his wife and how the backstory of his dog and him hoping to find the dog back. And I think the reason that's made possible is because of him not judging, right? And him being the model listener, right? Okay, I'm gonna reflect everything you say back onto you. That's active listening, right? I mean, you're not gonna get empathy out of me, but at least I'm not gonna be fake about it. I'm not gonna be like, oh my god, it's so hard to be you.
Right. Yeah.
There's something there for sure. So in the beginning of jail, he says it was hard because he had the thoughts of a free man, and then it starts becoming less and less of a punishment. And he remembers a thing his mom once said, that you end up getting used to everything. So in the beginning, even the lack of cigarettes was a punishment, but then a few months later, he was de-addicted, and then suddenly it wasn't a punishment anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. At the beginning, he was suffering because he had the thoughts of a free man about wanting to go to the beach, but actually being enclosed. But after a while, his cell became his only reality. And
right. And it was the same thing with his mom when he moved her to the residence, right?
That was the context where she said that, yeah. I think.
I don't think so. No, but they said, I think he said in that part, she always said that, but
Right.
earlier in the story, we learned that when
Do go on.
when she got moved to the residence, she cried at the beginning, but then she got used to it and she
Okay.
stopped crying.
Well, there you go.
Very sad. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she had some friends there, I guess. The
A fiance.
fiance. Okay, so yeah, then he finds a story on a paper under his bed, I guess, or something.
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah, and he reads it over and over thousands of times, and the story is about a man who gets out of his home village, gets rich, comes back 25 years or 15 years later, and his mom and daughter don't recognize him, so he decides to stay
And
at their...
sister. Mom and sister.
That's very fair from your side. His mom and sister don't recognize him, and they're running a hotel, so he decides to just not tell them that he's back, and he stays at their hotel.
And leaves his wife and kid somewhere else.
Yeah, somewhere
At
else for the
another hotel,
night.
I
I
guess.
think he just wanted to surprise them in the morning or something. Well, surprise the mom and sister. And yeah, during the night, the mom and sister rob him and kill him. And and then the wife comes the next day and tells the mom and sister, and they kill. Well, they do something that makes their life not there anymore, and
Themselves.
on themselves. And so, and his reaction to the story is obviously the most interesting part. He says, on the one hand, the story is unbelievable. On the other, it is natural. In any case, I think the traveler deserved it, and you should never play. That's his exact reaction to that story. It's really, I think it summarizes Meursault quite well. And I don't know about this part, what I thought about when he said, I think you should never play.
Right.
Like a prank. He
but
wanted
he
to
just
do a
doesn't
prank,
get
right?
it. He just doesn't get life, I think. I think that's, well...
He doesn't get
I
an
think that's one of the-
aspect of life, but I think the interesting thing and why it's such a relatable character is that the absurd man understands some parts of life way better than normal people, let's just say.
Than other people, and then some parts he just doesn't understand at all.
Yeah, like for example, all these social conventions, you might encounter an absurd man and think, what? I don't know, what does he do that's weird? That's the thing, the character is relatable to me, so, well, at least it was more when I was an adolescent, so I don't know how to find a weird behavior, but really, he would challenge you on most of the things you do, right? Again, I want to say, for example, you fake liking people. No, sure. You fake liking people because you have to, right? You have to interact with some people. He's just honestly going to act disinterested with whether he likes them or not, at least.
Right.
At least there's an authenticity there.
There is an authenticity, but at the same time, he does fake. Like, he doesn't say, hey, I don't like you. I think that's what he learned. He just learns the social cues to a lesser degree, right? I learned what I do is if I don't like someone, I act normal. Like I don't let them perceive that I dislike them. I give them no hint that I like them, and I try to move the conversation to an end in that way. But he doesn't tell them explicitly either that like, hey, I don't like you, I want to leave this conversation. Like he's not completely.
I don't think it's necessarily ever I don't like you. I think it's I'm bored.
Right. But he doesn't say I'm bored either. He just says, yeah, whatever. He acquiesces and just like wants to move on.
He does tend to acquiesce. Yeah. It feels less inauthentic than some of the things we do, I'd say. To people we're forced to interact with.
But we don't kill people, I guess.
Well, we've never been with a revolver hit by the sun in the middle of the day after being quite tired. And okay, the trial happens, and essentially everything looks like a show, because when him and his lawyer walk into the courtroom, the lawyer just starts smiling at the journalists, shaking hands. Everyone's like, hey, Johnny, right? And
it's a community,
yeah, it's a community. That's the vibe. It's like we're back at it today. And then he gets approached by this journalist. And the journalist says, hey, thanks a lot for providing us with a good story. It's usually really dry in the summer. And Meursault wants to say thank you, but he finds it weird, so he doesn't. And then he finds out that him and a patricide are the only interesting stories of the summer, and the patricide is going to be judged after him. So things happened. You get really the impression that he's being judged for his character, of course. And so most of the discussion is centered around him not crying at his mother's funeral. Then the finding out about him accepting a coffee with milk at his mother's funeral, probably smoking too. Right, the smoking, I remembered it now. Happens, and everyone's shocked and in awe. Then the lawyer, Meursault's lawyer, is worse than the prosecutor at his job, and he tries to defend it and kind of make it evident that he's not really being judged about the crime, but instead about
he's not laughably bad though. Like
no,
he did feel worse than the other one, but also the other one had a better case.
Sure, because
all things
the guy
considered.
the guy killed someone, and also admits it because he's honest. So then, kind of the lawyer squeezes out of the prosecutor, and the prosecutor says in the end, "Yes, I accuse this man of burying his mother with a heart of a criminal."
Mm-hmm.
That's what he says. So it's quite explicit from like no one tries to hide it that he's not even being judged for the fact that he killed a man. Like, and also, I mean, obviously the prosecutor knows that it's a shut case, open and shut case. So what he's really trying to do is get the death sentence instead of just like 20 or 30 years in prison.
Yeah.
I think that's what. So there's a safety in there that the prosecutor can base himself on, and also. And I mean, this, I don't know how he spun that. I actually didn't understand that passage. I didn't really have time to reread it. But he spins it in a way where he says, and look, really, the lack of love and emotionality for his mother is what makes a world where patricides are possible. So really, this man is responsible for the crime we're going to be judging next as well. And he even prefaces that by saying, I'm sure the members of the audience won't find it too audacious for me to say that this man is responsible for the next crime as well, which he had no relationship with, right? Remember that part? That's That's incredible. So
that's lawyer talk, yeah.
Right. It's always, and again, it feels like a show because you're like, let me just use this tool and combine it like this and make the, he was just for his character, really.
I like how... Considering the different perspectives in the book is really interesting. Like looking at exactly the same event through different lenses is really interesting. And like this is another way of looking at the crime. And it's so funny that at the end, Meursault says about the case that the prosecutor presents, he says like, yeah, everything he said was sound and everything sounded good with the way he presented it. about like him being accused and like, yeah, everything was right. I did not cry at my mother's funeral. I did not do this. Everything is factual and good.
Yeah, there's a logic to it. And again, also the book is written from Meursault's perspective, so I noticed this structure in it. It really is, I think, unique because he says everything in a checklist manner. Did you not get that impression? He's like,
oh yeah.
Like, oh, at 10 a.m. Marie was with me and we made pancakes and ate breakfast. After that, she left, and then I like.
Yeah, but also the beginning of the chapters, right? The beginning of the parts. The first part is, Mom is dead today.
Yeah, right.
Let's
right.
and then the other part, the first part ends. Yeah, so I shot him and I shot him 4 times again, and then the start of the second part is, when I was in prison,
Right.
what they did is this.
You're right. The first part is like, my mom is dead today. I have to take a 3-hour bus. I don't like taking 3-hour buses.
Maybe it was yesterday or today that she
Right.
died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the entire book, yeah, and it's not, and it doesn't even make it uninteresting necessarily. It's just, it's unique. It's unique.
Yeah.
So then he has this psychological progression in his cell after being condemned to death, which I didn't mention. So he's gonna be executed.
He lost the case, and it feels like the emphasis is more on the reaction of the people. We don't even know, like, in the moment, did we get anything from him?
No, it really is described in 3 sentences where he's like, then I came out, I was condemned to death, and that's it.
And they brought me in the cell or whatever.
Yeah. And again, the audience did act like it was like a pre-recorded sitcom reactions, like ooh, right? Like that's exactly how it felt. Now some parallels, yeah. Well, all that happens is the last part, I guess. Chapter 5 of part 2 is really like Jean-Paul Sartre's The Wall, where he has this progression of going from a man who's alive while alive to dead while alive. And maybe you can say more about this, maybe it was more interesting to you, but he ends it with kind of accepting it and also just saying, I just hope that a lot of people show up to my execution and they bathe me in, I don't know, their cries of anger or something like that. He just hopes to get a reaction out of people, I think.
You know what? I actually don't remember the details that made me like it. I guess I like the psychological progression, and it was like The Wall in the sense that I think there's literally like sentences saying, I was trying to imagine what it was like to not experience anything. Like in The Wall.
Counterfactual thinking about, what if just one thing changed? What if, like, while the person was reading out my sentence, they messed up one word and I wasn't condemned to death? Like these, that's I can definitely imagine that. Like, you think, what if one member of the jury was a person who's more empathetic to people who are absurd, and he would have like convinced everyone that I wasn't guilty and I would have been out. Like, imagine just one little change that would have changed everything. So that's interesting.
And now I'm pretty mad at myself for not remembering what the priest says, but I think it's a very important part of the book where the priest actually gets him to be angry and involved in life for the first time. Like, right. He's always there. He always acknowledges his physical sensations, but he never feels any. He's never partial, and that's the first time he's partial to himself, like for himself, right?
Yeah. I think maybe if I were to reread any part, it would probably be chapter 5 of part 2, but that wasn't very clear. I noted one thing down, that when the priest asks him, what kind of afterlife do you want? He says, a life in which I'll remember this one.
Right.
That's interesting, because he does yearn for his old life.
Mm-hmm.
And although to the viewer or the reader, it doesn't even seem that desirable. Like, what did you really lose? Cigarettes on a Monday morning on a French terrace or like Algerian terrace? He really was attached to this kind of routine of going through the motions. And maybe that's Camus' way of saying, like, yeah, look, our life isn't the most fascinating, but we do care about it. Who knows? So he really okay. So here's my summary of my impressions about the entire book. He lives his life in a checklist manner. He is amoral, but not immoral. He's heartless, but in a uniquely neutral sense, not in a negative one. Or another way to see it is he's asocial, but not antisocial. And that comes from his absurdism, which is conveyed through a certain logic, where it definitely gives a certain relatability to any person who's not, it doesn't have to be absurd. And there's a certain part of us that perhaps questions these daily customs that we engage in without really questioning it normally, without their attention being drawn to them, some attention being drawn to them. And you realize some absurd aspects of life. And again, it's like satires, right? You exaggerate a certain factor of something, and it makes you see more clearly the consequences that that's having on your life.
Is he absurd because I feel like he's absurd because you remove the absurd in the more like common use and not in the philosophical sense part of human beings. I feel like he's absurd because he doesn't have idiosyncrasies or partiality, as I said, right? He's not like really intense about something for some reason as we humans are, right? That's kind of unknown. He's very logical, and maybe that's where it is. He's human. He has sensations, but he treats everything very logically. Even like, okay, I want to feel good and be with Marie because it feels good, and then that's what I'm going to do. What he's missing is the sort of partiality and idiosyncrasies that make us irrationally sometimes like something or dislike something, and he's missing that, and that's the weird part of human beings, but he's missing that, and he's very weird.
I see what you're saying. It's almost like by being absurd, well, you think he's absurd, but in actuality, his absurdity displays our absurd parts because he doesn't even have them.
Right.
So it's really
and I think
ironic.
What's missing from that image is morality, because it doesn't feel like our morality is irrational and random, right? But maybe it is. Maybe we just all feel this way, but not for rationally founded reasons. And when you remove that, you get Meursault.
Well, sure. In general, morality doesn't feel that irrational because societies are the best way to thrive as Homo sapiens, and societies require morality to function. But the way people act in everyday life is a little bit different from the concept of morality when you really get down to it. Maybe that's displayed in certain ways. Like revenge would be one of them, right? Raymond almost logically explains how he needs revenge to take revenge on his ex-girlfriend for cheating on him. And Meursault's like, he liked her, he cheated on him, so he needs to take revenge. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
And then it all ends in a battle, and it escalates, and that's how, obviously, dig 2 graves before you engage in revenge. So, yeah, it's his absurdism ironically shows our absurdism. That's the bottom line. And that makes me think about the Buddhist quote, in sitting, just sit. In eating, just eat. Whatever you do, don't wobble. Because he doesn't wobble, right? Again, he's attracted to Marie's physical aspects, therefore he gets with her. Right? There's no in between, there's no hesitation. And Buddhism is a lot about eliminating friction, right? If you were sliding in a tunnel, a lot of it if your life was sliding in a tunnel, there are a lot of friction points, and Buddhism is about eliminating those. And I feel like he is free from that in a deep sense. Because for us, with introspection, all the intermediary steps would be like, I don't know if I like her. I don't know if she likes me. Should I text her? Should I wait before texting her? Should I blah, 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 blah. But for him, it's like, oh, again, like an animal. Oh, I see woman on beach. I approach woman on beach. I get with women on beach, right? It's there's a straight line to his objectives. And again, that's the biggest part of the absurdity of us that is brought forth by his absurdity.
That we're not a straight line.
It's because we do
make sense.
wobble, right? We do have friction in our lives.
Is it? I don't want to say he's the Buddhist ideal, though.
He might be. I mean, that's the thing. You put him in a society, it doesn't work out. But it's the same thing with a monk, right? What are you doing meditating 8 hours a day? Go work, right? It's if you put him in the mountains and he's alone, the guy's going to be happy, right?
Right.
Like, oh, I got my little routine. I go to the top of the mountain. It's all beautiful. I see the sunset. I see the sunrise. Like, he'd be happy in the mountains. He might be the Buddhist ideal. That's it's a pretty good thing to notice. I think I'm done. I wanted to draw a parallel with theaters, with the audience of the court case and him not being judged for what he's being judged for. But
no, I think that was good. I think we convinced ourselves that it's a pretty good book.
That's a pretty good book. But also, like, just in the maybe the value of any good book comes out in its analysis, but when you read Dostoevsky, or even William James, right? It's a pleasure to read it. But I think this didactic checklist manner of writing, it definitely conveys exactly what you want from an absurd man. But it doesn't make it the literary experience that you would expect from a top 40 book. You understand? Like,
I feel like you have to gob down everything he's writing to get the whole point. But as you're reading it, you're like,
get the point.
Get on with it. Because a lot of it is really just like, there's a whole, it's probably like a chapter of that day you were talking about, where it's literally just people were walking to the concert dressed in blue. Some other couples were there. A couple with a baby was there. And then at the end of the chapter, after like describing how he smokes a cigarette, he's too lazy to go get sausages downstairs. He prepares something in the oven because he's too lazy to go downstairs. The people with the blue shirts come back from the concert, and then the same couple walks back, and it's like, okay, man. But at the end, you're like, okay, I get the point. It's
right.
I guess it's hard to read.
Right. The message itself, only gets to you by the end, or even retrospectively, because at the moment you're like, oh my god, can I just Okay. Here we get to I'm pretty satisfied with that. Here we get to Anders Ericsson's peak, and he's essentially the person who invented deliberate practice.
Studies experts. He studies people that are very, very good at what they do. And I mean, I guess he's a psychologist. And that's his area of study, is studying experts and asking especially how do they get where they got to. And a lot of interesting things come from it.
Yeah, I'd like to have a quick discussion of it, if you want.
Yeah, I mean, we're there.
Yeah, we're there. So, as I said in our earlier 30-second discussion, not in this episode, is that it really is a life-changing book. Because you discover that expertise is never born with. You're never born with expertise, or even the potential to have expertise, although we all are. It's really made. It's really forged. And the way to forge it is endless practice, but a very specific kind of practice. So essentially, he has studied many experts in his life, Ericsson, and he understood that their success was directly proportional to the hours of practice they put into their craft. Now, he is actually the person, his studies are the studies quoted by Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers about the 10,000 hour rule. Turns out that's a misinterpretation. There's nothing magical about 10,000 hours. And also, you can put 10,000 hours into anything and you might not even be an expert, because really it's about deliberate practice. It's not about just doing something repetitively. And an interesting point about that is that doctors who are a few years fresh out of medical school are actually, from objective measures, better than doctors who are 20 years out, because their training isn't up to date and the continued medical studies aren't really designed to make them better. Like,
Right.
they're just not designed well.
I can imagine that. Just someone getting more and more efficient about things you see in everyday life, but maybe not expecting the unexpected, right?
Yeah, and the biggest problem with that is the normal pattern of us getting good at something. Like, well, I'll just get to the point. Automaticity, right? As soon as you pick up a new skill, like playing ping pong, at the beginning you really think about, okay, how should I hold this? Is this angle right? This angle right? And that's essentially what you should be doing for the rest of the practice. You should always deliberately modify the way that you're holding something with a specific goal in mind of getting better. Again, it's not directly that.
Right,
But-
not exactly, because I think as you progress, the deliberate thinking goes to different things. The holding of the
Yeah.
racket becomes automatic, and probably should stay automatic if it's right. Then your angle has become automatic, but your angle is not right. So you need to like re-trigger that relearning and correct the angle. So I think you get to higher levels of what you're thinking about.
Yeah, for sure. But the only thing that you don't want to happen is like any sport that you play casually, right? At the beginning, you had to think about the foot placement, about shooting the soccer ball, but now it's automatic and you've been doing it for every week for 3 years and you don't know why you're not getting better. Well, it's because the automaticity just, there's no improvement when it's automatic. You really have to kind of get down to the details and really improve everything about it. So now, he studied, from fighter pilots to violinists to mathematicians. Everything is consistent to his theory. There's almost no way to disprove it. Also, an extremely important thing is that before you're 8 years old, if you start practicing a skill, I think that's what I learned in my lecture about for my prof. It might not be directly in the book, but essentially, if you want to become an Olympic athlete, a lot of disciplines are like this. If you start practicing after you're 8 years old, you're essentially never going to get there, because your brain is so malleable and so receptive to mental representations, which we'll get to shortly, that's exactly when you should be drilling these things in. If you're not putting 4 hours of deliberate practice every day since you're before you were 8 years old, it's really going to be hard to compete against people who have done so.
I think especially and I think that's an interesting point in the book, especially for well-established disciplines.
Yeah.
Where the discipline has been known in that discipline how to practice to get to the best level for decades or even centuries or thousands of years, and people are at such a high level of human potential that to get to their level you have to practice immensely. I think if you're in a relatively new discipline, the rules aren't that well established, and it's really interesting to see that. I think what this reveals is that there's sort of no limit to what humans can do, in the sense that we certainly don't know the limit about pretty much anything, right? If someone knows exactly the right way to practice and starts at 3 and practices deliberately for whatever, and then by 20, instead of getting 10,000 hours, he gets like 20,000 hours, there's no telling how good that person would be.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened with the golfer
Tiger Woods?
Tiger Woods, yeah. Well, as Balthazar Gracian said, time and die against any two. Now, what he should have said is
That's so badass, though.
I know, it's so good. But the thing is, I think it just made it a little bit worse when you discover that he is an immortal bard in the story. So obviously time and die against any two would work, but that's really an interesting aspect of it, because if he were human, what he should have said is time, eye, and deliberate practice against any two.
Wait, where did you get that from?
I don't know, some poet, but it's really beautiful.
Yeah, but what do you mean he's an immortal bard in the story? In what story? What?
I don't know. I just know the quote.
Okay.
So, because the formula of your output is really the quality of what you do, multiplied by the time that you have. And if you did have infinite time, it doesn't really matter the quality of what you do. But that quality aspect is important for humans who have limited time. And that quality comes from deliberate practice. Now, there's something called purposeful practice, which is just a little bit worse than deliberate practice, but it's better than naive practice. And naive practice is essentially thinking that repetition makes you better. Now, I really like this book, although, I don't think he's the best. I think reading Heidi Grant Halverson's Succeed was more enjoyable because she gets to the point quicker. She really summarizes things well. I think he really wants, it feels like this is his life's work. And he really puts everything into it. He's like, here's a student for whom I developed a memory of 80 digits through 2 years, and here are the exact details of how that happened. He really feels like a scientist. He writes like a scientist. He's like, okay, this is how we got over random assignment problems. And in any case, it feels like a paper. It feels like a paper that he vulgarizes for normal people. But Heidi Grant Halverson's book feels like a self-help book that integrates science. Here it's like a science that tries to make it available to the people.
I see. I think it just takes a while because there's a lot of stories to exemplify what he's saying. Yeah. And that's why you don't
it's
like
fair.
it.
I don't know why, but it just feels like he's rambling a little bit. But the point gets to you, so that's important. Now, this confirmed our episode on experience our incompetence. Because it literally says, 20 years of experience of a doctor does not statistically increase their competence.
Right, but
it's interesting.
Yeah, but it feels to me like when you're saying this stuff, you're saying, I am better than a doctor. Well, the real thing is a fresh doctor that just learned all the material
that was
may be better on average than... That was season 1, Chris?
Yeah, that was season 1, Chris. But all I am saying, my larger philosophical point was that, indeed, pure experience is nothing if there's no quality of experience, right?
Yeah.
So there's this purposeful practice, which I had time to take notes for, but unfortunately, let's discuss purposeful practice, then deliberate, if you remember the difference between the two, and then mental representations. And I think that's what we can stop at. Now, purposeful practice has to push you outside of your comfort zone. You have to be fully focused. You have to have clear goals for your sessions. You have to have a plan to reach those goals. You have to monitor your progress, and you have to sustain your motivation. Now, the best example of this is a recurring example in the book about him essentially teaching a guy named Steve.
Well, that's the thing. He just forced him to practice. He didn't teach him anything.
Right. He learned deliberate practice in a parallel manner with Steve, but Steve really did it all himself, right? So all he did was maybe for an hour, 1 hour long sessions 3 times a week or something like that, 2 times a week.
I think 2 or 3, yeah.
2 or 3 times a week. For 2 years, he did a digit memorization task of saying 1 digit per second, and Steve just had to recall them and tell him, say them back to him. Now, a normal person's memory is around 7 or 8 digits. So I don't know, around a phone number. And indeed, Steve had exactly that memory at the beginning. Now, with time, after 2 years, he built up to 80. Now, he was no genetic specimen. He didn't start practicing before 8 years old, because importantly, when we're talking about being number one in the world, like the number one in the world, in a developed discipline, that's where the 8-year-old thing applies. Actually, Steve was the best in the world at that time, I think, at memorizing digits in that task. Yeah. And a later subject experiment of Ericsson beat Steve and beat the record and was the best in the world at that time. And he remembered I think it was 100 digits.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, so he developed an expert through, a little bit naturalistically through his methods. So let's look at how each point was addressed of purposeful practice. It's outside of the comfort zone. So when Steve got a sequence of numbers right, for example, 8 numbers, they moved on to 9. And if he failed 9, they went back to 7, so minus 2 digits. And that way he was constantly challenged. And if he had failed, well, he just had to reprove that was his level. So he had to build up to 9 to know that he deserves to be tested on that level. Constantly challenged. He was fully focused because Steve was a long distance, or he was a runner. So, he knew how to dedicate himself to one thing. In a way, it's not really that, but whatever. He had clear goals, just building up more digits. That's all he needed to do. He had a plan for reaching those goals. That's where we'll maybe get into mental representations. He had a way to monitor progress. He was also very important, the feedback has to come instantaneously. And with Steve, it was exactly that. Because as soon as he got a number wrong, well, I'm sure at the end of the sequence of the numbers,
Right.
he was told, okay, you got them wrong. So let's rethink about that. And sustained motivation. Well, that Steve would kind of did that himself. So, but apparently positive feedback is the best way to do that. And also, socially sharing your goals and your milestones, because Steve was becoming the best in the world. So he was getting known for this. So that's impressive. And also seeing, when you monitor progress, seeing the numbers go up can be motivation in itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that, of course, falls apart when there's plateaus. So now, mental representations are essentially schematics that make you navigate information faster and take out the limit of your short-term memory. So for Steve, he was essentially bunching up groups of 4 digits into running times. So let's say it was 2, 3, 5, 9. That means that he was thinking about running 5K in 23 minutes and 59 seconds. And for him, it was just instantly getting mapped onto, okay, this is a performance like this, right? So now these 4 digits became one element. And then he had a trick for sequencing those, because when he was getting to 80 digits, obviously the order in which these performances are, right?
The chunks, yeah.
Yeah. So mental representations are essentially a mental map of whatever discipline you're engaged in. If, how Mozart could, from just reading music, he knew how it would be played.
How it would sound.
Yeah, how it would sound. It's the same thing. It's like having a piano in your mind. And that comes through repeated interaction with a piano. And obviously, very specific strategies. You can't just, walk in circles around a soccer field and learn every grass granule by heart. So that just happened. So I guess for chess, it would be like having an entire board and sequences of games arranged in patterns. So I hope that it's clear what we mean by mental representations, because I'm sure if you have engaged in anything repeatedly in your life, like for me, I have philosophy, and there are links between different philosophers and what they say and their disciplines and the genres of books, and I can see it in my mind. There's a schematic. So yeah,
I think mental representations is just really broad, and it really doesn't matter what you're talking about. You're using them. We're all using them for anything. He says it in the book too. Like for walking, we have mental representations of how to walk. We don't think, look, my 5 toes have to be independently all controlled in this manner so that I don't just fall forward. They have to flex down to hold me. We don't think about our calf, about the bottom of our foot. It just happens, and that's what it is. And it just gets to higher and higher levels. So if you're thinking about soccer players, when they have a kicking technique and they've learned it, they just kick. They don't think about exactly where their left foot is placed and how to kick the ball, how to swing back, how to whatever. It becomes automatic.
Yeah, but I think the most important thing about making them explicit is that if anyone wants to modify them, like go actually with a wrench and go modify their mental representations, which is what is necessary for getting better, because you have to lose the automaticity. So if you wanted to be a better walker, you would have to, first of all, understand what's going on in your brain when you're walking, and then go and modify the little details.
Yeah.
So,
I think the point is that it's just a useful thing to think about it in this way. Mental representations are what makes you good at something and makes you efficient and good, and they are the answer to how to get better.
yeah. So I look at it as you have to actually interact with your subconscious and what's going on there, and you have to spot the problems and go and drill things in, because that's the thing. You have to drill them in. You can't just consciously take note of your, I don't know,
I'm bad at this,
or your foot being 15 degrees flared out when you're walking. That, to make it go back to the 0 degree angle for the next month, you're going to have to consciously think about that foot. I think that's a good way to see it, where you have to have an extreme. So if I wanted to be a better walker, I have to have the extremely specific goal of flaring my foot in by 15 degrees. And the only way I can make that subconscious is if I do that for 2 hours. Like, I go to the forest, walk for 2 hours, and my only goal for those 2 hours in like fully focused manner is to flare my foot in 15 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if I really want to become an expert walker, I'm sure I'd spot 10 other problems with my walking, and I'd have to address those points like point by point. So again, that's purposeful practice. That's mental representations. And what is deliberate practice? I forgot the difference. Not much more than purposeful, is it?
I didn't feel the distinction, I guess, as much as you did. I think
I didn't
he notice.
Explicitly says it like, okay, purposeful is better than naive, but I got deliberate.
Mm.
And there's a sentence in there that literally describes the difference between the two. I just didn't get to that in my notes, unfortunately.
Yeah, that would be good to know. I don't know.
Unfortunate. Maybe we can get further in that book and really have a more rich discussion. But for now, we're going to set the ground for, look, anyone who's an expert, I'm saying the best in the world, Ericsson has essentially looked at them and seen that they're not a freak of nature. They're simply a freak of nature in their motivation to persist and to practice 4 hours a day from the time they're 6 years old to the time they're 30. And now you're saying, oh my God, I can do 20 push-ups, but the world record is actually 10,000 in a row. How could his body be built like that? How would that even be possible? Well, he can tell you. 4 hours of practice. Well, he says that it should be so challenging for you that you shouldn't be able to do much more than 4 or 4.5 hours of deliberate practice a day, by the way. So, like these violinists who are at the Berlin Orchestra, they're taking midday naps because it's so exhausting. So this should be extremely effortful, by the way. So, yeah, essentially Ericsson has this theory about, hey, deliberate practice is the end-all be-all, but it's not going to be an easy path. And in the intro, it says, look, if you wanted to become the best at something, you could just see it as a mountain and walk some trails, go left and right, and persist, and really just walk, keep walking. But if I gave you a map to the top, even if you didn't want to get to the very, very top, at the very least, you'd only be ascending when you're doing the walking, right? So in this book, I will give you the map to the top, and you can choose wherever you want to go with it. It's really inspiring. And there are a lot of stories about a 70-year-old getting aspiring to get a black belt. And I don't know if you got to that part. Yeah, I got to chapter 7, so it might be a little bit later. But a 70-year-old aspiring to get a black belt in karate, and essentially just a lot of stories. Next time we can do a second part on this.
Yeah.
So we'll have deliberate practice, very specifically what it's all comes down to. We'll have some stories to tell, because Ericsson does like to make his points through stories. Now, any practical things from Camus? I mean, yeah, I think if you engage in reading any absurd literature and then you're self-reflective enough, you can spot some inconsistencies in your life and maybe correct them too. Because if you see Meursault just, I don't know, being blatantly honest with a woman who loves him and saying like, I don't know, I don't want to marry, but, well, I don't explicitly want to or don't want to marry, but if you want to, and you find that monstrous in a way, well, at least maybe it can inspire you to, not be a people pleaser and be absurdly honest with some people. And you'll see that the consequences of that in the real world are just people being, sure, weirded out at first, but the reason they're weirded out is because social customs make it so people aren't honest all the time. So imagine you have a new coworker, you're at a new job, and I don't know, they're presenting the office to you, blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the day, they're like, hey, you want to go out for coffee with us? Instead of saying, oh, I'm tired after this first day and I want to go home, you could just say, hey guys, I really like you as colleagues, but I don't think I want to develop any personal relationship with you guys because you're not my type of people to hang out with. Imagine you just said that. Then you would free yourself from further demands of spending time with them, and it wouldn't be weird. You wouldn't have to make up excuses or explicitly lie, right? You would free yourself from so much just by being absurdly not actually that absurd, right?
Yeah, I think another thing you can get out of the stranger is shifting your perspective sometimes. Because if you're like me, and I guess like us, we got immersed into the character of Meursault, and seeing everything from his perspective sort of made sense. And it, like, seeing it through his experience, all his actions and all his thoughts, even when they were immoral and sometimes blatantly and really badly immoral, it sort of made sense and you went along with it. So maybe we can all think about it, about the way we're viewing the world through our lens and the things we are taking for granted, and how maybe we shouldn't. I think,
yeah, like his very non-participation in life can reveal a few things about about things you're doing. And as for Ericsson, I mean, honestly, if you have any goal, we'll hope to convey it way better in the next episode. But essentially, if you want to get better at absolutely anything, except if you want to become an NBA player and you're 5'10", you can shape your brain. Like what he displays is that the adult brain is way more malleable than we had ever thought. And you might not be the best in the world at Olympic weightlifting because you're starting at 40 years old, but getting better is always possible. And the reasons you might get frustrated and fail at it is because you're not approaching it from the right way. And the right way will come in the next episode.
Yeah, I think what you can get from our discussion about Peak, is that the name of the book? Is you should probably read Peak. I think people should really read this book. It's very accessible and really not that scientific, not technically scientific.
And it's life-changing, yeah.
And it is inspiring.
Yeah, it just opens up the entire world of possibilities of, oh, I could just do that if I could dedicate myself to this craft in effortful.
I think you should stay conscious of, and he says it in the book, the violinists that got very far, and everyone reports saying, look, the deliberate practice was not fun.
Yeah.
But they did it anyway. And what you learn from it is that it is possible. Not that it's going to be fun, but I think there's so much to gain from just being so good at something that it's worth it in the end.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks all for listening.
The rating was 3, 2, 1, 9. Let's go.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think if we had a better memory or notes of The Stranger, it would be 10. But I just reacted to my environment like an absurd man. Thanks a lot for listening. Go to thinkinbros.com for more information on my blog, and contact us at thinkinbros@gmail.com for feedback /questions / just positive feedback. And yeah, I already said that. So I was Chris this week, and we'll see you next one.
See ya.